Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are enjoying Global HR Forum so far. We welcome to the second plenary session of today. I'm Joo-Hyun Kim of Hyundai Research Institute. It's a great honor for me to having presiding for this session with such a great speaker and great audience. So the topic of our session is harnessing creative talent for the corporate change. So as we all know, the creative talent is most valuable asset for the organizations, especially in the knowledge society. But most of our discussions have been focused on how to recruit or scout top talent. Relatively less attention is given how to managing and how to motivating the talent peoples. Today, we like to discuss how to motivate and harnessing creative talent for the corporate changes. For that purpose, we have a prominent two speakers who will share their insight and their expertise, and also two excellent discussants who have expertise in this talent management. So before we start speeches, I'd like to introduce our speakers and discussants. From my left, Sujita Karnat. Would you give a applause? She is the first speaker. She is the head of human resources in Tech Mahindra Limited in India. She has a lot of field experience in human resource management, and as a result, she won many prestigious awards. Is it right? Yes, as I know. Next is our second speaker, Toyohiko Aoki. Aoki is the president of Aoki Corporations. He started to work from 1964 at Aoki Ironworks. And in 1995, he changed the company name to Aoki Corporations and inaugurated as chairman. He wrote the book, Maito, in 2009, and he might introduce about the book on these sessions. And then our first discussant, Hyojun Kim, he is the president of BMW Group of Korea. He joined BMW from 1995 and became president and won many awards. He earned PhD degrees in international business strategies from Hanyang University. In 2009, he wrote books. The title is Young Heart Dream the World. Is it correct? Is it Korean or English? Okay. And then our second discussion is Pat Gaines. He is the president of Boeing Korea and vice president of Boeing International. He attended West Point at the Military Academy of the United States and joined Boeing in 1987. Currently, he is serving as the chairman of the association, American Chamber of Commerce in Korea, and also as a member on the Presidential Council on National Competitiveness. So now, as a moderator, I have two things to have to. The first is keep you awake after lunch, and second one is keep the time schedule. It must be not easy work to scheduling the time with such excellent speakers, but I'll try to do. So now we have two speakers and two discussants, and Sujita will present about 20 minutes, and then the Aoki has one videotape about 10 minutes. So he will play the videotape 10 minutes and then present about 20 minutes. So he will consume 30 minutes. And then we have a discussion for each about 10 minutes, and then we'll have some leftovers and for the discussion for the pro audience. Okay, why don't you, Sujita, come to, yeah. Let's give big applause.
So good afternoon, and it's a great pleasure to be here, and a privilege as well. So thank you very much for this opportunity, all. This morning we had very eminent speakers, very distinguished, and they did paint a picture about the economy right through. And 4 words leapt up to my mind, which was to say the economy at the moment globally looks volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, and ambiguous at the same time. We heard that the global business landscape is shifting and changing. We heard Mr. Brown talk about the consumers shifting more east than it used to be in the past, or it is. It will take some time, but definitely the markets are changing. Up till now, 2012 also brought in a lot of promises. Emerging economies continue to strengthen. There are regulatory changes in parts of the world. There are some natural disasters as well that we know of. Nevertheless, business leaders across the globe are very, very bullish on growth. They're pressing the pedal harder than before. But I think we all quite don't know which side the wind is blowing, isn't it? Anyway, the business leaders today think that growth is going to come from economies that they haven't been before, markets which they don't know very well till now. And these economies and markets are probably parts of Asia, Latin America, Africa, and so on. And therefore, what these markets earlier were just sources of cheap labor till now have suddenly become and transformed themselves into markets of consumers who are ready to buy products from all over the world. So the questions in front of CEOs today are to say, what do you think is the way you're going to enter these markets? Can I just push it up? How do I just turn the presentation thing? Yeah. Okay, I think this must be what it is. Yes, I'm sorry, I got it. Yeah, I just figured it out. Okay. So what's in front of CEOs is to say, how are you going to enter these markets? Is it through joint ventures or mergers and acquisitions? You know, people in HR profession like me know that just to scale up operations in your own country is hard enough, and to assimilate from different countries is going to be far more difficult than what we think. So what kind of talent do you think you need in these countries, and what skill sets would they probably also ask for? And what kind of teams do we form? Is it going to be a mix of locals and expats? And if the answer is yes, how are you going to ensure that your corporate culture is being understood by all these different diverse teams? Moreover, how do you think you can keep all of these people engaged? And more importantly, can you actually retain them as well? That's the question we need to ask. I need some help here. Can I get somebody to... Yeah, it's not changing. So I just need to show you something which is actually hyperlinked. And if somebody could do that. Oh, yeah? Okay, no, it is... Okay, so I would just... No, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to, and I'm going to unfortunately come back. There's a slide that I need to show you. Okay. I was going to talk to you about here on generational diversity. One of the challenges that companies have is that they have to manage the different generations of workforce that they simultaneously exist in their workforce. First thing is that age diversity is very good to have, very helpful, because they bring in different perspectives. And also, they probably, if you have a generational age diversity in your team, you can probably deal with your customers of all ages better. But the flip side to this is that people of different generations in the workplace behave very differently. There's a lot of tension that comes into the workplace, and this we heard Dr. Shapiro talk about some kind of emotions. He listed them on this morning. There are actually 4 generations, and I didn't list down the oldest, which is the traditional generation. And this generation is probably were born after the World War II, and probably they don't exist in the workforce anymore. The 3 other generations that we need to talk about here are the baby boomers, the Generation X, and the Generation Y. The exact years that's put up here could actually be debated, but we can stick to what I have at the moment. If you read the list of stuff that each of these generations are looking for, in summary, the baby boomers like steady work. They like climbing ladders, corporate ladders. Life for them, it revolves around their work. That's the main concern. They have a social life as well, but the people, the colleagues, are their social life as well. For them, they're loyalists, and they love to build their company, and that's the hallmark about these guys. Generation X, a little more cynical, and they're less team-oriented than the baby boomers. They like to actually draw a line between personal and work life, so they have their social circle outside of the work life, but they're very skeptical of people who just go home early and they just want to enjoy their paychecks. So they like working long hours, and the people here who want to make a difference probably to themselves. But Generation Y is a little mix of these 2 generations, the older ones, and they're also called the eco-boomers. They value their work as long as they find it meaningful, and they want to make a difference in the world. They're creative, they're change agents, and one thing about Generation Y is that they're convinced completely that the other 2 generations messed up the world so much that they are going to be fixing it all their life now. So the 3 workforce generations, the loyalists from the baby boomers, the Generation X, which is all cynical, but you need them because they sort of prevent you from getting into the standard pitfalls, and then the Generation Y, which is completely creative, and the change agents. So we have all of them in this, in our workforce. So what does the global workforce now look like? It looks like this somehow. So we talked about generational diversity, the first block that's over there. We also know that with the advancement of technology and everybody being spread everywhere, we're going to have virtual operations. You don't get to see your team members anymore. You can't carry out the standard traditional practices of team building as easily as you did before. We have all kinds of mantras, diversity and inclusion. We talk about different nationalities, varied cultures, ethnicity, and so on and so forth. So HR heads like myself take targets on practically every single parameter that is shown here. This question is asked often to all the CEOs and all business leaders. Have talent constraints impacted your business growth? And so I put up this data from a PwC report, which I found resonated so very well with what I was doing back home in India. There are 2 kinds of costs that they talk about here. The direct cost is the cost of talent, and it's just getting skyrocketing for all you care. It's just going up. The second thing is all about opportunity costs. And we find that in this survey that was done, we found that 1 in every 3 CEOs said that they couldn't innovate effectively. And 1 in 4 CEOs said they can't pursue an opportunity because they just didn't have the right talent, or they delayed or canceled a strategic initiative because, again, they didn't have the right talent. 50% of about 1,200 CEOs surveyed for this study said that they were hit by one or the other problem. So the next thing that we know is that while talent is so difficult to manage and costs are more difficult to manage, how do leaders, what is the ask of leaders today? We will know that leaders will have to work harder to manage a diverse team. They will have to be accountable for employee engagement, manage people long distance. Technology has its advantages and disadvantages. Encourage higher levels of innovation, more global experience, they will have to rotate through more roles. They have to perform more roles than before, become better general managers, and be forced to lead with fewer details to make critical decisions. So talent is the only way to go. All that we want is good talent, which is agile, innovative, productive, engaged, motivated, all the good things. But is that possible? This is what is expected of HR today. Being more strategic on talent is HR's first priority. Good thing is most HR heads, which are called Chief of Human Resource Officer, CHROs, are direct reports of CEOs today. No longer it's a function which is pushed to the back. But the point is that while we look at this, the HR strategy for bringing in talent, or the talent strategy, if you will have to align very closely with the business strategy. Critical roles have to be mapped every day, probably, considering the kind of business pace that we earn. Talent attraction becomes a major goal. Probably HR managers don't even know who their talent is. Identifying and selecting talent is a big deal. It's very hard. More importantly, rewarding and recognizing them becomes even more difficult. And probably, and I would be also victim to this, or probably I'm propagating it, saying that we actually land up over-incentivizing non-talent more than anything else. So there is a whole bunch of things that we have to do, and all these bubbles are always on my chart as well. So one of the things we experimented, and that's what I'm going to talk about in the next couple of slides before I wrap up, is to say, I think talent, we talked about the global workforce, great. We need to manage them. We need leaders who are superhumans, great. But I think what has to be done is also to change the organizational fabric. We realized pretty early on that traditional talent has its limitations. They cannot perform just as well in changed business scenarios. So what do? We just hire differently. We just say that we bring in new business managers who have a DNA which is different, and we infuse that into our bloodstream, right? The other part is to say, how do we get this talent? Hiring is one, but getting talent through acquisitions in different companies in the world, countries in the world, is another way of doing it. And then create what is called a fractal organization. Give everyone enough space, measure them by some parameters which are easy to measure, which gives them, so you measure them by financial parameters, measure them by people numbers, measure them by what you will, but give them the space and ensure that they are part of the whole ethos. They may appear to be independent, but they have a framework to work within. So that's a blueprint we sort of tried to do together. So how can the new organizational form exist? The new organizational form is not going to be linear, it's not going to be monolithic, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a combination of traditional structures. It will have, which is probably the cash cows in every business in the BCG matrix. It will also have with it a number of core competency, stick to the knitting concept. And so we will have a number of them which will be, focusing on just the core competencies, what we do very well. Third, of course, is the mergers and acquisitions, but more importantly, we'll have the incubation of startups within the company. And why do we need all this? Just because your workforce is global, it's diverse. There are people of different generations working in it, and they want to do something very differently. They want to be entrepreneurs, and they want to be, not absorb all the risks of being an entrepreneur. Now, what I really want to say is all these 4 dimensions that we just talked about are not add-ons. They are interdependent, and they're interwoven, and they have to be actually interwoven with the existing dimensions. So the easiest are the traditional structures and the mergers and acquisitions, but getting incubating startups to be added to this, they have to be interwoven, because whatever is done in the startups is usually, till now, we do all of these ideations in universities, but you might have to bring some of those ideas right into the organization itself. And why do we need that? Because I think this is a new way of defining career paths for people. The challenge for HR now is to say that we need to create new reward systems. For management is that we need to create more horizontal processes to make all of this stick together and work. The other feature that's being developed in multinational, multi-dimensional firms is an ability to reconfigure. And this is something we have experimented with. You will see 3 teams there, and this is an illustration from sports. And it has got football, baseball, and basketball. And if you can read through that, you would know that decision-making is very different in all 3 of them. The idea is nobody really wants to sell standalone products. We all want to provide integrated packages of software and also of, more importantly, services and thought leadership. People from across the company in these 3 types of reconfigurable teams just move after opportunity, and they can be configured around them. Okay, so let me quickly summarize. I think there is time limitations. All that I had to say was organizations need to grow, and publicly listed ones probably have to maintain an attractive stock price as well as PE ratio. Growth is only possible if you expand into markets which are new and also diversify into adjacent offerings, your business offerings, and growth is fundamental to attracting and retaining talent. Environment will continue to remain complex, and this will start reflecting in the organizational designs as I just showed you, and companies will definitely move away from standalone commoditizing products to customized solutions. The future will also lie with organizations which have a global, motivated, engaged workforce, and they're willing to work on opportunities that serve our customers better. Lastly, as Christopher Bartler of Harvard said, we are actually pursuing 3rd-generation strategies with 2nd-generation organizations staffed with 1st-generation human resources. It's time we change that, and therefore the only way to do that is to invest and invest and invest in capabilities in your organization. Thank you, and I think I'm up for time.
Thank you, Sujita. Thank you for your excellent presentation. The next one is President Aoki. He will present in Japanese, so you can use the translation equipment.
毎度どうもこんにちは。日本に来た人どのぐらいいてます？日本に来た人どうですか？えらい少ないな。ほんまかいの？こんな少ないの？今日私日本の中小企業で、やってるんですけど、今日皆さんに、どういう具合にしたら一番こう理解してもらえるんかなということでいろいろこう考えて資料も作ってきたんですけど、一番ええのはもう眠らないように、先生が言うたように眠らないように画像を見てもらった方が一番ええやろという具合に思いまして、ちょっと画像ちょっと見てもらえますか。これ画像を見てからちょっと話したいと思いますんで、よろしくお願いします。
へこむばかりでは前に進まない。逆風の中、明日にしっかりと向き合い、世界へ勝負を挑む果敢な企業もまだまだある。日本の底力の源は決して枯れてはいない。
最終的にはその毎度1号という衛星を作ろうというふうになったんやけど、僕らにしたら若者をこうその時のものづくりに関心を持ってもらう手段でやったんですよ。でこれはもう我々にしたらその何でも作れるわという自信もあったし、いうことでやろうということでやったんですけど、こんだけ大きな反響があるとはまさか思えへんかったわね。もっと嬉しいのはうちらの会社、小さな会社なんですけど、そんな会社に修学旅行生が来てくれます。これで今やっぱり年間に1000人ぐらい来てくれた中で修学旅行生が何人ぐらい来てくれるわけです。これは最高に嬉しいです。将来彼ら僕ちんが彼女たちがものづくりやってくれたらという気持ちになりますやんかいな。
年1月23日 H2A ロケットに搭載された人工衛星マイド1号が鹿児島県種子島宇宙センターから打ち上げられた。マイド1号はロケットから切り離された後に宇宙空間で VHF 電波を使って雷を探知する実験で運用される。大小さまざまな町工場が密集する東大阪。ものづくりの町として知られるこの地には各分野でトップシェアを誇る会社や他社の追随を許さないオンリーワンの技術により特別な製品を作り出す職人や技術者集団が数多く集まっている。その高度な技術力の結晶マイド1号は約50センチの立方体で約50キロの重さのミニ衛星。プロジェクト立ち上げから約8年もの歳月を経て東大阪のものづくりにかける熱い思いを乗せついにマイド1号は広大な宇宙へと放たれた。
でね、この宇宙いうのはね、小型衛星は特に中小企業に向いてると思います。大量生産ではないから一品料理やからこれはもう中小企業一番向いてると思うんですよ。飛行機もそうなんですよ。宇宙で得た技術を飛行機に生かす、飛行機で得た技術を宇宙に生かす、これミックスしたらねものすごい面白いことできるしね、この関西で航空宇宙を地場産業にする。
人工衛星マイド1号の開発と推進で主導的役割を果たした株式会社青木。その従業員数はわずか35名。しかし金型と航空機部品の製造で著名。その上1997年にボーイング社認定工場として東大阪で唯一認定を受けた会社としても広く知られている。
正直そのボーイングのそのサービスを受けるというだけで我々中小企業はある意味名誉なんですよ。これはね。でみんな頑張ってくれてこうやろうと。で通訳の英語から英語やから英語全然書きないから通訳の人も来てもっとよしやろうって万年ほんならねその関東のね、ある大手企業が同時に受けるようになったんですよ。うちと同じぐらいの日にちにそのサーベイを。でドンとスタートしてやると結果的に言うと関東のちょっと保留になったんですよ。保留うち通ったんですよ。でこの記者が聞いたんですよ。なんで通ったんでっかと。ほんできっと社長が立派やから通ったと言うてくれると思うとったんよ。どこだと思うボーイングの人。ちょっと思い出したね。ボーイングの人がね、こういうことなんですよ。その青さんとかの社員の目が光っとったりとかです。これはねなんとも言えないんで、それは天下のボーイングですからね。どれかな、それだけどちゃうと思うけどね、そこまで見てるかと、今日本のサーベイどうですかと、数字ばっかりの世界ばっかり見てね、ボーイングの人がその人の動き、人の誇り、それが目が光ってるということを言ってくれたんですよ。これはね嬉しかった。ほんま嬉しかった。
人は 何のために仕事をし、会社は人にとって何なのか。逆風の中、奮闘し成長を続ける企業を全力で支える経営者と社員、その人たちの思いは共通していた。お金や出世のためだけに働くのではない。自分たちの仕事への愛着、そして誇り、それ以上に自分たちの仕事が多くの人に喜ばれているという実感。もしそれがなければ、どこに仕事や会社の価値があるのだろうか。
よく騒いでるけどね、悪いことを悪いってどないしまんねん。と思いますか。そんなことになれへんで。それより日本の今持ってるいいことを持ち上げる、もっとやれというような形のやればね、驚いてますわ。これ日本は絶対勝てる、もう勝てるというよりというかな、世界から憧れる、尊敬される国になっていかんとあかんと思いますわ。このこと知ってます？日本でね、創業100年という会社何社ぐらいあると思います？アメリカもヨーロッパも創業100年の会社は80社やって、日本2万社ですよ。ダントツなんですよ。これ何物語ってます？僕こんだけすごい国民ですよ。こんな国世界にないんですよ。これを誇りに思わんと何を恩に思うんやと。
All systems are ready.
Engine start.
Engine evolution. SLB in motion and liftoff.
混迷期の日本企業が本当に必要なものは、底力を生かした長期的視点からの戦略、何よりも心を奮い立たせる夢と希望、そして心を熱くする覚悟と志なのかもしれない。毎度1号の成功はそのことを私たちに語りかけている。人工衛星打ち上げを後押しし、天空に向けて飛び立たせた夢と希望。そこにはいかなる激流にも翻弄されない日本企業の強く確かな底力があった。燃えるような熱い思いの人たちがいた。
はい、どうですか、これ見て。かっこええやろ。どうですか。ちょっと拍手。僕がここへ来たいうのは、やっぱり日本で中小企業が集まって、人工衛星作りました。それは毎度という人工衛星です。でそれで毎度という形してんねんけど、この人工衛星を私が中小企業の仲間と一緒に作ることが目的じゃなしに、我々中小企業に皆さんみたいな若い人がもっともっと来てもらえるような会社にしたいなと、こう思ったわけです。で現実は、我々今物を作ってるんですけど、ホワイトカラーとブルーカラーあったら皆さんホワイトカラーに行きたがるんですよ。これ本当はブルーカラーの方が絶対面白い。これは僕はそう思います。でそのものを作るという、また人のために尽くすというのが僕は大事じゃないかなとこう思って、やってるの。現実はやっぱり我々中小企業には来ないんです。うちの会社は今60人です。そういう会社に人が集まってこない。だけど大きな会社は集まるやろと思いますわ。だけど、皆さんこういう若い人が 今大きな会社行きたいということは分からんでもないねんけど、中小企業もいい会社がたくさんあります。そういうとこもいっぺん就職に見てもらって、自分の力を中小企業でこう試すというか、でいずれは自分で社長になるんやというような気持ちを持ってもらってやってもらったらいいなとこう思いました。で今日私これ資料持ってきてるんだけど、ここ押したらよろしいんか。これもうありきらの時を書いてるんでちょっと抜かしますね。これ、どこかな、ここか。これが衛星作ったやつですかな。でまあ僕でそう言いたいのはね、これ私の名刺でんね。これ後から皆さんよければ名刺交換しましょう。でこれがね今私やってることなんですよ。これは無人飛行機です。これ V トールと言いまして、こう垂直に上がって水泳飛行するんですよ。今アメリカ軍が持ってるオスプレイというやつと一緒なんですよ。これ、エンジンが4発ついてます。エンジンが4発だから安定があるんですよ。これを今年の2月のシンガポールのエアーショーに出展しました。大好評ですわ。これは商売になるなと、これは儲かるでと、そう思ったんやけど売れませんね。これ実際なんで言ったら日本からにはこういうのは売ったらあかんということなんて法律で決まってますね、日本では。だから売れないんですよ。僕はこれを臓器とかで薬とか血液を運びたいと思ってたんですよ。無人飛行機で病院から病院へこう電車バトみたいな形でこう運んでみたいなと思ってこれ作りました。で韓国の人と一緒にまたこういうチャンスがあれば一緒に作りたいし、で、このものを作ること、チャレンジすることによって人材が僕は集まってくると思うんですよ。これはだからチャレンジせん会社に人材は集まりませんわ。これそう思いませんか。皆さんどう思います？僕はそう思ってるんですよ。だから、やっぱりチャレンジやなとこう思ってます。それでこれでざっと終わるんだけど、最後にこれ私本書きました。でこの本書いた中で自分のコマーシャルちゃいますね。だけどコマーシャルです。これいやこれね、僕この本日本で売ってんねんけど結構売れてまんねんやこれね。で、今日私がこの本なんで出したかというのはやっぱり人材なんですよ。である先生に教えてもらったことが私の人生を変えたと思っています。それは会社が伸びるいうテーマの本だったんですけど、私今月1回全体会議で会社でやってます。そこでこの本ずっと30年前からもう日本では絶版で売ってませんねわ。その先生の了解を受けて私の本の中にその一小節をちょっと入れました。今日ちょっと、そこを読んでみたいと思うんですよ。で皆さんに聞いてもらったらよく分かってもらえると思うんですわ。で僕もこの本のおかげで私の人生変わったんやから書いてくれたね。で皆さんにいっぺん聞いてもらって、こうやって聞いてもらいたいなと思います。ちょっと待ってや、目がね老眼ですねちょっと待ってねちょっと待ってね。これねちょっと中小企業の話なんです。中小企業の社員研修の話なんです。建築関係の会社の話です。で、ちょっと読みますよ。私が担当した3年目社員研修での話です。建築関係の中小企業に勤める24歳の男性社員 A 君が意見発表の時次のような話をしました。彼が勤めている会社のそばに最近とてもきれいな居酒屋ができた。その居酒屋には A 君たちも飲みに行くけど銀行や大きな会社の若い社員たちもやってくる。若い世代ですから気軽に声をかけ合います。男の子が女の子に声をかけ、君の自宅の電話番号教えてよということになるんですが、馬が合うと女の子も電話番号を教える。 まあ今やったら携帯電話やけどね、聞いた後何をするかは想像に任すわけで、狙いは一つでしょうが、それはしばらく置いときましょう。そして親しくなっていきますと、女性の側から男性の側に、どこに勤めているんですか、会社はどこかと質問するそうです。さて、その時聞かれた男の方はどういう態度を取るか、これが A 君の発表の要点でした。こんな時、一部上場の大企業に勤めている新入社員はどうするか。どこに勤めているんですかと聞かれるや、思うのに名刺を取り出すんです。もらったばかりのピカピカの名刺です。そしてそれを当たり構わずやたら配って歩くのです。もちろん女の子たちにも配る。ここに勤めてるからたまには電話してよ。会社に電話していいから。どうせ僕暇だから今度2人で飲みに行こうねなんて言って名刺を渡すわけです。ところが A 君のような中小企業に勤めている連中はこんな時何と答えるでしょうか。女の子がどちらにお勤めですかと聞きます。すると中小企業の社員は照れくさそうに頭に手をやって答えます。ちょっとね。このちょっとねというのは実は暗号なのです。若者同士の会話ではこれ以上聞いてくれるなという意味だそうです。だから逆に女の子としては相手が頭に手をやってちょっとねと言ったら、これは触れていけない話題に触れてしまったんだ、ごめんなさいねと心の中で納得して話題を変えるわけです。少々暗い話ですが A 君の話にはまだ先があるんです。中小企業に勤めている仲間の多くはそうやって会社の名前を伏せてしまうけど、自分は違う、僕は〇〇建設の工事課の A ですというように胸を張って答えるというのです。そうするとどうなるか。周りの視線が彼に集まり、一瞬彼のいるテーブルがシーンとなる。しかし A 君はひるまない。シーンとした後で彼は周りの女の子の目を見ながら、ねえ知ってる？僕の会社。知ってる知ってると順番に聞いて回るそうです。さて、そうするとどうなるでしょう。聞かれた女の子たちが大変微妙な顔をするそうです。つまり知ってると言ったら嘘になるし、知らないと言うと気の毒だし、ということで返答のしようがないわけです。A 君はそういう微妙な顔を見るのがまた楽しいというのですが、ちょっと皮肉った喜びですが、ここで終わりではないんです。A 君はそう言った後、こう付け加えるそうです。そう、知らないだろう？知らなくていいんだ。この俺が知ってるんだから、俺が知ってるいい会社なんだから、そのうちきっと君たちにも知ってもらえるような会社になるはずだと。するとどうなるか。もう一度周りがシーンとする。一度は然と言ったところでしょう。ところがこの後思いがけないことが起こったと言います。さっきまで名刺を配っていた大企業に勤めている新入社員が A 君の目をじっと見ながらパチパチと大きな音を出して拍手したそうです。その拍手に貫かないように女の子たちも拍手してくれた。その大企業に勤める人が後でこう言ったそうです。君は羨ましいな。俺は入社して間もなく1年になるとしてるけど、実は大して面白い仕事をしてるとは思えない。君はいいよね。入社3年目で自分と同世代だけど、誰が知らなくても俺が知ってるいい会社に勤めている。そういう誇りを持てる話ができるなんて。その後2人は何度か飲みに行って大変いい友達になったということです。近年にないいい話ではないでしょうか。皆さんの会社にはこの A 君のように他の誰が知らなくても俺が知ってるいい会社だで、そして今にきっとみんなに知られるような会社になるはずだからと胸を張って言ってのける社員が1人でも2人でもいらっしゃるでしょうか。ここが勝負の分かれ目ということではないかと思います。 そういう社員がいる会社は強いと思います。仕事柄、私は A 君が勤めている会社の業績を調べてみました。実に5年間、毎年 10% 以上の経常利益を確保している会社でした。びっくりしました。社員がいいから会社がいいのか、会社がいいからそういう社員が生まれるのか、鶏と卵のような話ですが、いずれにしてもそういう社員が支える会社は元気がいい。どうしたらそういう会社が作れるのか。このことは今、経営に携わる人たちが日々持ち続ける問題意識だと思いますということなんです。皆さんこれ聞いてどう思います？皆さん誇り持ってますか？自分に、会社に、この地域に。皆さん誇り持ってます？誇り持たんだあかんで。我々こうやと自分に誇りがなかったらな働かれへんで。僕はそう思いますけど、どうでしたろう。僕は今日本で一番今ちょっと下がってるいうのが誇りやと思ってます。もう皆さんやったら絶対誇り持ってくれてると思うんですけど、そういうことも合わせて今日こういうディスカッションできたらいいなと思って寄せてもらいました。よろしくお願いします。終わります。
Thank you, President. Now it's time for discussion, so I will hand over the mic to the Dr. Hyojun Kim for the first discussions.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Thank you so much for your very nice presentation, Dr. Karanat. I was very impressed. Thank you so much. And Aoki-san, you're also very impressed. 毎度ありがとうございます。In a nutshell, I strongly believe that everything comes down to human business. Only people can make change. But to change people, training and education are, needless to say, important. How to be sustainable and build up creative talent at the same time has been there always, from long time, our always never-ending story for us CEOs. In my experience, in 35 years in the field, I found it that there are some distinguished difference between the manager and leader. Manager who has a basic skill to perform the daily operations based on some instruction from her or his boss and could deliver some outcome as expected, some predictable result. This is the manager. Manager is always fine in terms of catch-up game, but they cannot be real meaning of leaders. On the other way around, leader is quite different because leader do not see today. Leader always talk about tomorrow. They are preparing another 1 year or even 5 years ahead. That's the leader. So leader always try to see some different things where other people doesn't see. Then he always creates something different from other crowds. So the basic role as a CEO or head of a company, we always cultivating the digging out a lot of people and cultivating the good people to become real meaning of the future leader, especially global leader in this circumstance. The framework of building up the creative talent, I believe, should be based on the covenantal relationship, not a contractual basis. Let's explain in this way. Suppose you are one of the CEO of one respective company, and you are paying 50 million won to one respective guy, one of your employee, and you believe, because I pay this guy to 50 million won, so whatever circumstance, whatever reason, I have to make some output from this guy, which is equivalent of that 50 million won. Then this is a clear contractual-based relationship. The other way around, if their respective employee see you as a CEO or as a boss, and if they believe I only received 50 million won as my compensation for annual basis, then I only need to work some very limited work score, which is equivalent that of 50 million won. Again, this is a contractual basis. But how can we define the success of a company? I personally strongly believe that the success of a company is like this. Distinguished value or distinguished the philosophy which can melt in or combined with those product or service your company produced. Those value and philosophy can deliver to the market and to the end user. Then you could say our company is a real successful business in the market. In this case, who's going to deliver those value and philosophy? That's our people, our partners, or more broad way, some group of our customer enjoying those philosophy or value in line with us. But that's why the covenantal relationship is much more important in these days to share our value and philosophy. Once they understand, our employee or our team members understand our value and philosophy, then they could easily make it one voice, easily convince the market, easily communicate in the right way to the customer, and eventually they're going to deliver some success to us. At BMW Korea, actually, we don't have any title or rank, unlike other companies, or like a Japanese company, like a Gwacho, Bucho, or Bujang, Chajang here in Korea. I get rid of all those titles in 5 years ago already. Because if we look our historical structure of company, is everything is structured in a horizontal, the vertical basis. And this system always creates unnecessary hierarchy and bureaucratic procedure, which is not necessary in these days. So after getting abolished all the title system, that means we have a horizontal system. Each individual have a full responsibility of their own job. So under their own responsibility, then they deliver a certain result. This associate really like this system, much more flexible and much more efficient way, of course. If I give you another example from a BMW case, I don't have all the final approval authority. That means normally I don't sign on the check. I don't sign on the payment request from our people because I gave a whole authority to each level of manager, each level of leaders. Not only in our organization, but also to our retail partner, our dealers. Dealers also have some delegate empowerment. So they fully enjoy under their responsibility, and also they deliver some very, how do I describe on these things? It's a very ideal result all the ways. This can, of course, make a fast-track decision-making process and communicate promptly with our customer. What is the management? In my experience, I can define the management is the process of decision making. If this is true, the one of the way cultivating our people to become a real leader or manager, then we should give them more chance to exercise by themselves to make certain decision on each level. Well, all this creativeness should start from define the customer. I already mentioned to our peoples, and whenever I have some chance to deliver my speech to several occasions, defining customer is the first step of creative thinking. Just ask yourself, who is my customer? Whom do I work for? What result should I deliver? Based on what expectation from outside? Then you can easily see or define your work scope. How can I create in a more right way? So with those some comments from the experience of beyond Korea, and as much as I enjoyed the two presentations from two speakers, so if you don't mind, I just want to add up with some questionnaire to you. The first, Mrs. Karnat, Dr. Karnat, your credo is that it takes creative people to successfully manage necessary change. But you probably have the same understanding with us. The future road for the further success is still paved by a lot of challenge, a lot of difficulties, a lot of uncertainties. So many uncertainties jeopardize corporate strategic process sometimes. So my question is, so to keep your staff always updated on new trend or new development, what is the best way to train them? This will be my question to you. And if you allow me one more question, actually, perhaps one smart or the agile employees thinking ahead and trying to anticipate the future can easily bet on wrong horse time to time. You know what I mean? Eh? So failure can be a part of the concept of an innovation business model. But how many failures can, as a company or as a CEO, tolerate before it's too late? So my question would be, in order to change the strategy at the right time, is there any reliable method to determine this turning point? Maybe these two areas, if you could answer later on, then I will be...
Yes.
Yes, I also have two questions to Aoki-san. So one is your concept of driving positive change within a business environment seems to do with the mindset of people for change. This is what I understood from your presentation. An inspiring person or a fascinating personality has a lot to share with our warm-natured visionary leader, just like you. It seems to be the ideal model. How do you balance this with the skills, the normal concept of skills, or competence, and experience? This is one. And another short question from my side will be, only few people work in an environment where something unique, or at least very exceptional is going on, which they could be very proud of. How do you make the ordinary people, or normally, very exciting for your people to fully engage on their work? This will be my question later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. And we'll take the discussions first, and then you can respond in the whole. Okay. So the next discussion is go to the Pat. So you can have about 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Kim. First of all, I really enjoyed both presentations. But Aoki-san, I have to say one thing. You said you showed a film so that no one would fall asleep. I doubt that anyone has ever fallen asleep in one of your presentations. You obviously have a lot of passion for not only the subject, but passion in the way you work and lead your company, so it was very enjoyable. Also, I have to say that I appreciate the ad for Boeing that you gave us in the film. You know, it's interesting when... It's interesting when they talk about aerospace being good for SMEs. I will throw one fact out. The Boeing company actually has 17,000 suppliers. That's an amazing number. And a large percent of that is SMEs. So there's a lot of creativity that we see coming out of the SMEs. And so it's a reason we do pay a lot of attention. But the other thing I would say is, even though our team may have said it was because of the shine in your employees' eyes, I do think there had a lot to do with who the president of the company was. So congratulations on getting qualified. You know, what I'd like to talk a little bit about is really what are the things that challenge us today. We have 170,000 employees worldwide in Boeing. But one of our major challenges is how do we keep employees? And I say that because when you look at the statistics for our company, we actually have almost a 50% turnover rate with employees under 3 years. You think about that. Under 3 years, when you're losing almost 50% of your employees, you say two things. First, as a CEO and someone who's run a lot of organizations, I think immediately of the cost of training all those people and then losing them. But also as a CEO of a company, I think about all the great talent that we lose. And so for managers, I think it's one of those challenges that all of us lose sleep over. And that really is, how do we develop a system that can retain employees? I've had the honor in Boeing of leading many organizations through change and being involved with acquisitions of organizations and bringing them into the Boeing company. Operations that are never easy on people. I'm very honored to be sitting here in a room with HR professionals, because one of the things that I learned in managing all of that change was having an HR partner is probably the most valuable thing you can do. It's funny, as I've mentored young managers in Boeing, many of them, when they're talking about starting up an organization, will talk about how they need a finance rep and how they need legal assistance. And my advice to them is start with HR. And I will tell you that having been through many experiences with it, having a good HR partner will solve many of your other problems. So what I'd like to talk about is, when you think about the employee life cycle, first you've got to attract them. One thing good about working for a brand company like the Boeing Company is we in the past have never had problems attracting people. We have a very good brand throughout the world, so it hasn't been that hard to attract. But I say hasn't been, because it's getting much tougher to attract good people. And I think the slide that Sujit put up talking about the generations and, the baby boomers and the Generation Y, Generation X is really a critical slide because when we look at the desires and needs of the workforce nowadays, it has changed. I also laugh sometimes because baby boomers, we're all the ones with gray hair. Sometimes, I think we ought to change it from baby boomers. I think we're out of being babies anymore, but we have a lot of gray hair. But when we're trying to go out and get the workforce now, we really have to think about other things. we have to think about some of the subjects that she brought up, the flexible work time, the balance of life issue. I know many of us, when we started in the workforce, you went to a company thinking you were going to work there for most of your adult life. You were willing to give them 16 hours a day. I mean, there was a very big difference in our generation and the generation that we're hiring today. And so as managers and as HR professionals, our real challenge is to say, how do we start developing processes and training that helps our organization be able to do this? Now, the reason I say training is a lot of times people look and say, okay, it's really the management's job. Well, what I would tell you is that if you don't have an organization that is focused on developing its people, retaining good talent, challenging your new people that come in, it will fail. You can mandate things as a manager, you can put policies in place as a manager, but if people are being brought in and their ideas are not listened to, if people are coming in and they're not feeling challenged, no matter what you do, you can't always guide it from the top, you will have issues and you will lose employees. So when I think about this, one of the things that we all have to think about is, how do you get a culture that values creativity? How do you get a culture that really seeks out the ideas of new hires and figures out ways to challenge them? I like Sujitha's chart where she was talking about having teams with generational diversity. How do you get these things in where the new ideas can really be brought out to everybody? It's a huge challenge for all of us and as we go along. But those are the things, when we're doing HR forums like this, we ought to be thinking about. We ought to be thinking about, how do we work up new programs? A good example, and I'm sure most of our companies up here have them, is where you develop rotational programs and you bring in your high potential people and you work them for 6 months in one area, then switch them to 6 months to another area. Because almost all of the people that we think are high potential that leave, when we do the exit interview, it's because they felt they weren't being challenged. And so that's an area that I think as HR professionals, as CEOs of companies, we all have to think about, how do we develop that attitude where everybody thinks it's their responsibility to keep good employees, to develop good employees, to really challenge them and make sure that they are feeling as part of the team. So it's one of those areas that I would say that all of us have work to do. It's an area, though, that I think forums like this are very valuable for. The last thing that I would say is, there are too many times in an organization where people see new hires with new ideas as a threat to them. And how do you ever create that culture in your organizations so they see new hires and see new ideas as helping them succeed? And once we get that in, where people see the new ideas and the new people coming in and their talent that they're demonstrating as helping them succeed, then you start winning the battle. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat. You said 50% of turnover ratio within 3 years in Boeing company. That makes me pretty comfortable. Matter of fact, we have also very high turnover ratio in our organizations. So now it's time to respond for the discussions. So Sujitha, you want to start for respond?
Yeah, but I would need the question again. So if do you have it with you so that I can respond very well? Yeah. No. Do you, for the specific question, do you have the question that he asked?
If you want to comment some more or the rest on those things.
He will have to
it'll be
repeat
fine.
it. Okay.
Oh, yes. Kyojun? Dr. Kim, would you repeat the question quickly again to the Sujita?
My question was, in order to keep your staff always updated on new technology or development, a new environment, how can you, what is the best way to train them, to updating them in a current fast-moving society?
Okay. Training, I think even Pat stressed on that. I think in the employee life cycle program, life cycle that we deal with, training for a couple of aspects, the domain in which they are, for the technical skills which they need, and more importantly, behavioral skills which they need. We constantly train them. We have that as a competency development mandatory for each individual through the year. So managers and then leaders carry a balanced scorecard, which has so many mandatory trainings to be accomplished at different levels. And the composition of that training varies. If it is a very young person, it is more technical. It is more domain specific. We run a conglomerate of companies, as all possible that's here in Korea as well. So if it is an automotive, we give them domain-related training in automotive and so on. So that's how we do it right through.
Well, how about President Aoki? Do you have anything to respond to the question raised by Dr. Kim?
どういうのかな、我々中小企業の問題と今の問題いうのはちょっと若干ズレがあると私は思うんですけど、質問の答えになってるかなってんか分かりませんけど、今年、夏ですか、ヨス万博へ行ってきました。ヨスのその韓国プサンの。でその時はちょっとこれ誤解されたらいかんねんけど、日本と韓国とかあんまりいいことなかったんで、我々が行ったんが250名で行きました。万博始まって以来の日本人が来たということで行ったんですけど、大歓迎してくれました、向こうで。でそれがすごいなと思って出て、今度アグリさやかの里って知ってます？これ皆さん知ってます？さやかの里いうとこ、テグのちょっとこっちがあるらしいんやけど、そこが、400年日の丸の国旗、日本の国旗をずっとかけてくれてるというとこなんですよ。知ってます？僕感激しましてね。それはなんでや言うたら、昔、日本が400年前秀吉が韓国に来たと、攻めてきたという時に、日本の将軍が、これはおかしいということで韓国の方に着いたと味方して、でもう韓国でずっと、移民した、今の言葉で言うとおったということなんですね。でそれが今その恩を、日本のどういうかな流れがあるかも分かりませんけど、400年日の丸の国旗を立ててくれとったということなんですよ。これが今我々企業として一番忘れてならんことちゃうかなという具合に私は思います。で社員にその会社の歴史なりというのも、でなんで仕事をしてるんやというのも話をすれば、まさかボーイングさんが 50% の3年間 50% の失業率や言うたらうちの方が勝ってるでという具合にちょっと若干思ったりしてるんですけど、やっぱりその定着率というのがこれから企業として一番大切なことではないでしょうか。僕はそう思うんですけど、どうです？だからその定着率するのにはやっぱりトップが常に語りかける、話をするということが、私ら中小企業はそういうようにしてます。だからその機会をどんどん作っていかんとあかん。先生が言うてくれるように、 マネージャーとリーダーとはまた違うというような話をされましたけど、全く同感です。それはだけどリーダーとしてはやっぱり人材を常に把握しとかんと戦えませんわね。俺はそれが 50% の失業率言うたらボーイングさん何してんねんということになるわね。ちょっとごめん、うちもボーイングの仕事してんのにいやいやいや、まあそう思いませんか皆さん。僕はそう思います。だからトップが常に語り合って自分との会社の歴史も話をしながらという形で自分とこの会社についてくる家族ですやんかいな。会社いうのはファミリーやと僕は思ってます。はい。答えになってますか
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Pat, you might have something to say, but say for the next. Okay. Okay, now it's time to open the floor discussions. We have about 6 or 7 minutes to go. So I can take about 3 questions from floor. So if you raise your hand and name your name and affiliations, and then you can take short questions. Is there anyone? Hand over the microphone.
In the middle.
Would you stand up, please? Somebody, yes. Please make sure the questions short and clear.
네, 안녕하세요. 저는 성균관대학교 경제학과 재학 중인 학생이고요. 네, 발표 감사합니다. 저 창의적 인재에 관한 발표였고, 저도 이제 구직자인 만큼 그 교육과 선정 과정에 대해서 굉장히 궁금한데, 그 뽑는 과정에서도 그 각자 회사마다 그런 어떻게 보면 창의적이랄까 그런 과정이 있는지 궁금합니다.
We'll take the questions first and then an answer. Is this anybody? Yes. There.
예, 안녕하세요. 말씀 잘 들었습니다. 저는 그 한양대학교 토론 동아리에서 온 고범준이라고 합니다. 우선 김효준 사장님 영상으로만 뵙다가 이렇게 직접 보게 돼서 참 반갑고요. 제가 드리고 싶은 질문은 굉장히 인재에 대해서 많은 말씀해 주셨는데, 사실 그런 것들이 우리나라 기업의 정서상 그 어떤 직원들의 그 진짜 실력으로 보고 실력으로 뽑는 것이 아니라 우리 기업에 맞는 사람을 뽑는다는 이미지가 좀 강하거든요. 그래서 이러한 우리나라 기업 현실에서 오늘 저 앞에 계신 토론자분들께서 해주신 말씀들이 어떻게 적용을 할 수 있을지, 그리고 우리나라 기업 현실을 어떻게 바꿔야지 진짜 기업들이 우리 기업 입맛에 맞는 사람이 아니라 진짜 인재를 뽑을 수 있을지 한번 그 고견을 듣고 싶습니다. 감사합니다.
One more last question. Yes. Yes. Would you stand up with yes?
저는 서울신학대학교 3학년에 재학 중인 황인구라고 합니다. 개인적으로 저는 이제 팻 게인스 보잉사 사장님께 질문 드리고 싶은 게 있는데, 그 회사에서 50%의 그 이직률을 보였는데, 제가 생각했을 때는 이제 어떤 직원들에게 도전 의식을 주지 못해서 그만큼의 이직률을 보인 것 같은데, 만약에 그런 게 아니라면 과연 직원들에게 얼마만큼의 그 도전 의식을 심어뒀는지, 그러기 위해서 어떤 정책이나 어떤 구상을 구체적으로 했던 경험이 있는지 그것을 좀 말씀해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Okay, the answer start from the Sujita. She might answer the first question and some other questions, and then second question might be good for the Dr. Kim. Can you explain about that? And the third one goes to Pat. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the young lady who asked this question, we hire people from the universities, and I think it's possible for Korean companies to do so as well. One of the things we began to do is building a talent pipeline, and for building that, we reached right into the university. We helped them with tailoring the curriculum to suit the needs of our future needs. Therefore, we take in people, we train them in advance before they get into our organization, because it makes it easier for them. The first thing, and also to answer partially the question by the gentleman over there, we take people who are 70% ready. And we know that if they are 70% ready, they will easily be motivated because they will be challenged to stretch and do the rest. So that's the answer that I have.
Well, it's quite simple. It's Korea as a country, we always become some global player. It's not only countryside, but every corporation or the business unit also become a global player. Under that circumstance, which qualified people do you want to hire? That's quite simple. It's a global player. Someone who can deliver some result in domestic market here, only Korea. That's a domestic manager. We don't need that kinds of manager anymore. We clearly need some global player. I'm not talking about BMW. I'm talking about whole industry atmosphere at this moment. So we clearly want to have global player who has a global mindset, who can easily adopt some difference of culture or language or lifestyle or some perception even. So basically, someone who can convince in that respective market or respective people, then be fine. So educational background or their hometown or age or gender, it doesn't matter at all. So please don't astonish at all. Just try to apply wherever you want. If you believe you can cultivating your career more in a professional way, then just try it.
Pat,
is that good enough?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Pat, short response.
So that was a really good question. I have to tell you, I started my career at Boeing as an instructor. And I learned as an instructor that if an instructor says, that's a great question, then they know the answer. If they say it's a really good question, it means they're stalling. So they're trying to figure out how to answer you. No, when I talked about 50% attrition under 3 years, you have to remember that there are many factors. Most of that is occurring with our U.S. workforce. And right now, back to the generation chart, we have a lot of employees who have no desire to work at a company for more than a couple years. They want to try a big company. Then they want to go out and try a small company. As Aoki-san said, with a small company, sometimes it feels like you're in a family. They want to try different things. So some of these employees, no matter what you do, they will probably go. But the other thing that we did is we incorporated into our training at all levels. So from people that are transitioning into being leads, people that are first-level supervisors, training that really talked about how do you challenge your employees. And that is helping us. That trend is coming down. We are retaining more. And that problem was very significant. When I was quoting that statistic, it was about 3 years ago. But that trend is coming down. But we will never get it down to zero because the workforce is changing. Some of our hopes really is a lot of these young high achievers will go out, they'll learn more, and we'll get them back. We'll get them back and they'll be more experienced and we'll welcome them back into the Boeing family because it is important for them to learn and it makes a better employee. So that's really what we're doing about it.
Thank you. We already spent 3 more minutes what we allowed for us. And now it's time to close the sessions. I hope this session is valuable and helpful to all of you. And then let's give a big hand to our speakers and discussants.
네, 감사합니다. 수고해주신 김주현 현대경제연구원 원장님과 소중한 강연을 해주신 연자분들께 다시 한번 감사의 말씀을 드리겠습니다.